Hi, I'm Tom Weeks, and welcome to this Klusterbox tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to describe the overtime equitability functionality which I built into Klusterbox. So this is going to cover the OTDL equitability spreadsheet and how to generate that and the tools and all the information you need to do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the basic menu. This has been changed. Now you can see there's an OT Equitability Spreadsheet option, and there's OT Preferences. Okay, so if you press OT Equitability Spreadsheet, it's going to give you the spreadsheet for the quarter that you're currently in. So you press that and press OK. You get a progress bar. And then once that progress bar runs out, then you get a prompt, spreadsheet opens up. Okay, so this is what the spreadsheet looks like. Okay, and you're going to have an overview, which is this page right here. And that's what the overview looks like. Then you pan down to the tabs, and you can see that there are 15 weeks. There are 15 additional tabs plus instructions. So W1 means week 1, W2 means week 2. I've got information entered in for week 2, 3, 4, and 5. The rest of the weeks are blank. Okay, you can see here that the overview consists of these rows repeated over for each carrier. So the first column is the name, second column is the status. This is going to be 12-hour preference, 10-hour preference, or off. There's also a fourth option called track, which I'll explain later. This column for makeups, this is makeup opportunities for if a carrier has if an award from a previous grievance settlement from a previous quarter, awarding them makeup opportunities. You could enter that number in here. Actually, you would enter it in Klusterbox, and I'll show you that later. But you could also enter it in here. But to save it in the database, you would enter it in Klusterbox. These rows here, this is for refusals, total refusals in the quarter. This is total hours of overtime during the quarter. This box opportunities is, you'll notice, refusals plus overtime gives you total opportunities. And difference from average is opportunities, it factors in opportunities, number of carriers on the OTDL, takes averages, does some math. You get difference from average right there, and that's the key number for the spreadsheet. That's what you're looking for. Did the carrier get an equitable amount of overtime opportunities during the quarter? If it's black, they're getting more opportunities than average. If it's negative, they're getting less opportunities than average. Okay, moving on to the weekly sheets. Okay, first, let's press this tab, W1, that's week 1. And let's be mindful of where we're at on the sheet. So you can verify the date of the sheet that you're on with this this field dates. So this is going to give you, it's going to tell you that this spreadsheet covers January 1st through Friday the 3rd, and it's going to be week 1. And also that's going to be reflected on the tab that you're selecting. So these blued out fields, that just tells you that. That just tells you that those cells are not inside the quarter, since the quarter begins on a Wednesday. So let's go to week 2. I've got information entered in for week 2, week 3, week 4, and week 5. Okay, so let's stay on week 5. And now to understand these weekly worksheets, to understand these weekly worksheets, you have to understand these this group of 3 cells. Okay, and the top row. The top row is going to give you refusals, and the bottom row is going to give you overtime worked on that for that carrier for that day. So each one of these, each group of 3 cells represents 1 day. And okay, so refusals. Let's go to week 2. Now on Sunday, this carrier refused 4 hours of overtime on this Sunday of week 2. And on Saturday, they worked 2 hours and 77 clicks of overtime. Monday, that's they worked 12 hours of overtime. That's probably because the carrier worked their NS day, and so on. So, okay, let's move on. And also, there are totals for the week on the right-hand side, and at the very bottom there are totals for that for the day, and average overtime for the day. Okay, let's move on to the OT preference, and we'll still cover this worksheet, but we have to move back and forth between these screens. But okay, so OT preference. Now, once you open OT preference for the first time, or once you generate the spreadsheet for the first time in a quarter, these preferences are going to automatically default to 12. Now, that's going to happen the first time you open it for any quarter, and you have to. So you're going to have to update your preferences every quarter. They're not going to carry over from quarter to quarter. So from here you can see the name, and then there's the preference. That's the 12. Again, you have a 12-hour preference, a 10-hour preference, and there's also a track option, and I can explain that later. Okay, so let's make some carriers a 10-hour preference, and great, and then you press apply, and so that way if you regenerate the spreadsheet, close that out, press that spreadsheet button, you'll regenerate a spreadsheet, and then that spreadsheet will reflect the new preference for the carrier. Okay, and you can see there, this carrier, and let's see here, this carrier antenna. They're both 10-hour. They're both on the 10-hour preference now. Okay, now let's try something else. Okay, now you can have make-up opportunities for a carrier. Like, say there was a grievance settlement, that carrier was awarded 50 hours of make-up opportunities for the quarter. You can just enter in 50 right there and press apply. Okay, so now if we generate a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet's going to reflect 50 hours of make-up opportunities. But before we regenerate a spreadsheet, let's go back and take a carrier off of the OTDL. Because you can see the status right here. What that means is the carrier on the list or off the list? And that auto detects based on the information that you have entered in on the main screen in Klusterbox. So we can go to this carrier who's on the OTDL right here, smash hits. Let's edit their status, and as of January 25th, 2020, they are on no list. And then apply. And so we can scroll down, and we can see they are on no list. Okay? So let's go back to Preferences, OT Preferences, and here you can see there's the status of that carrier is off, and it's in red. So that means that carrier is off the otdl. So we have a carrier off the otdl. We have 2 carriers with 10-hour preference. We have makeup opportunities. And generate a spreadsheet. We get the progress bar. Spent a lot of time on that progress bar. Just press spacebar to go through the prompt. So you'll see here that that smash hits carrier is now off. You have 2 carriers with a 10-hour preference, and you have a carrier with makeup opportunities. Now these makeup opportunities are going to affect this formula. And to see what it would look like without the makeup opportunities, you can just delete that, and it would go back to what it was before. So they were down 20 hours from the average, but with the 50 hours of makeup opportunities, now they're down 63 hours from the difference from average. So let's take a look at these other columns here. So a check, what that does is it just tells you if there are any inconsistencies in the list. I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but it's just a warning. It doesn't affect the formulas or anything, but if a carrier is on the list and then they get off the list and then they get back on the list all during the same quarter, normally that's not contractual, although there have been some agreements around the COVID thing that would make that contractual. But if that happens, you're going to get an error in the checklist in this column here, and that's just warning you of that inconsistency. It's going to be a consistency error. So reports is report. What that tells you is, let's just press it, and it tells you the carriers. It tells you all the effective carrier status changes during that quarter. So at the beginning of the quarter, that carrier was on the otdl. And then on the 25th, remember, we took that carrier off the otdl, and now they're on the list. And if we change their status again, then it would also be noted on this report. Refusals. Okay, now we can select refusals. This carrier, you can see this carrier has 4 hours of refusals on January 5th. Okay, so that would be during week 2. So let's generate a spreadsheet and see if that's there. Let's go back and generate the spreadsheet. Okay. So for week 2 for antenna, just as this, let's turn on this refusal screen. So for January 5th, there are 4 hours of refusals, and those 4 hours of refusals are annotated on the spreadsheet for week 2. Okay, I do have to explain the track preference. Okay, so to say you have a carrier who's off the otdl, and this is just so let's just take smash hits for example. If we have they're off the otdl, but we can still select track, and then let's select track, apply, and generate a spreadsheet. Now what's going to happen here is you're going to be able to see all the carriers, opportunities, refusals, all that stuff. even though they're off the OTDL. So the carrier is off the OTDL, but the status says track. And the reason for that, and if we change that status to off, then the refusals would be blanked out, the overtime would be blanked out, and the opportunities would be blanked out. And this would say off list. But if we change it to track, then all the numbers show up just as if they were still on the OTDL. The reason why I did that is I envisioned a scenario, and it's not hard to envision this because it happens all the time, where a carrier is either getting a lot of opportunities than everybody else, much more opportunities than everybody else, or they're not getting enough opportunities, or they have a bunch of makeup opportunities, and management comes to them on the last week of the quarter and says, hey, why don't you do me a favor and get off the list? And the carrier is like, well, okay, I'll just get off the list, and that's going to negate everything. Now, that might not be an issue if the carrier is owed a bunch of opportunities. I guess that's their prerogative to get off the list. But if they have a lot more opportunities than everybody else, then it could still be, I think it could still be a grievance. So you could use this track, track status preference thing to denote when a carrier is off the list, but you're still keeping track of the carrier's opportunities because you think there might be a violation there. So that's what track is for. Okay, now if you'll notice, when we generate a spreadsheet, let's do this again. Now if you'll notice, when the spreadsheet generates, it pulls information from the Klusterbox database and it tells you what that carrier's overtime for the day is. Now, you could have a question of how does that come about? Where does this number 2 hours and 77 clicks come from, right? So, let's go back on this screen, and we're in this investigation range. The investigation range is January 25th through January 31st, okay? So that's actually week 5. January 25th through January 31st. Okay, so let's take a look at this carrier, antenna. Right there, antenna. Let's move over to here and click and take a look at antennas, clock rings, right? So you can see that the carrier moved off their route at, this is the carrier's total amount of time, the 5200 time. So when the carrier moved off, when the carrier moved on, and this is the route that they moved to, they did their off-route assignment to, right? So what Klusterbox does is it gives you the option of calculating overtime in 2 different ways. The first one is what I call straight overtime, which is any overtime over 8 hours is considered overtime, and any overtime done on their NS day, that's also considered straight overtime. And also I have something I call proper overtime, which is it's limited to only the overtime off of their route. So if they worked, 12 hours that day, but they only worked 1 hour off of their route, then the proper overtime is 1 hour. And if they worked their NS day, then the whole 12 hours would be off-route overtime because you don't have a route on your NS day. So anyway, you can take a look at these and you can compare this overtime number compared with these this information, for each day, right? And you'll see that the overtime given here is what I call proper overtime. It's only limited to the overtime off route, and to get that, you have to have the the times moved off the route and the time moved back on the route and any multiple moves. And you have to have all that information properly filled out, or you can select, like I did down here, if you enabled the NSDay code, then, like I did on Thursday, then you can see down here that all the overtime on that day, all the hours worked on that day is overtime because they don't have an assignment on their NSDay. Okay, now, say you have a situation or some sort of local agreement where you agree that overtime is just overtime. If they worked, 9 hours that day and they didn't work anything off of their own route, then you have 1 hour of overtime, and that's what you've agreed to in some sort of local agreement or memorandum of understanding or something of that sort. So you want to calculate overtime a different way. You can do that in Klusterbox, and the way you do that, let's close out that spreadsheet, go back, you go to Management, the Management menu, you scroll down to Spreadsheet Settings. These are settings for all the spreadsheets. And down at otdl Equitability Spreadsheet Settings, you have this overtime calculation preference. You can toggle that to all, and then you press Apply. That updates the record, and then you can go back, regenerate your spreadsheet, and it will give you that straight overtime as opposed to what I call proper overtime. And also, there's this little button here, Info. That's not the Apply button, so don't be confused about that. What that does is it gives you a little information as to what all and off, what those translate as. And it gives you a little note that says if a carrier has no assignment, or is unassigned, then for that time that the carrier is unassigned, Klusterbox is going to use straight overtime since the carrier doesn't have a route, so it's got to use some sort of calculus. Okay, I just want to give some personal notes about this type of grievance, this otdl equitability grievance. First of all, you may want to do this investigation, you may not. Because it can be a lot of work, because you have to enter in all the clock rings for the OTDL carriers for every day for the entire quarter, which is 3 months. So that's a lot of information you're entering in. That, if you have the automatic data entry, you could do that. It's going to make it faster, a lot more thorough, and but you otherwise you're going to have to manually enter in all those clock rings. And I think management should already have this information in with their overtime OT admin tool. They probably have all this stuff, and you should just request it. And you can request that under Article 15, 17, 31, and National Labor Relations Act. So you have access to everything management has access to, and you can see what they're doing on OT admin. Although there is the question of, is that information that they're entering into OT admin, is that accurate? And that's probably where this investigation using Klusterbox could come in handy to refute what they're entering into OT admin. But yeah, just be forewarned. This is a task. I think even with Klusterbox, and that the whole refusals argument is a completely other can of worms that you're going to have to sort of navigate, resolve, because management can. What are they calling refusals? What are they calling overtime? Who knows? So that's something that you're going to have to figure out and just make a decision on. So that's about it. And thanks for watching this tutorial, and happy union stewarding.